Paul Ince banned the words Man United from Reading FC's training ground this week, and yet the Royals showed they needed more than gimmicks to improve their away form as they suffered a 4-0 defeat at Stoke. Welcome to the Tilehurst End Podcast, episode 234. I'm your host, Marc Mayo. This is the podcast by Reading fans for Reading fans. We might have a couple of interested new listeners this week, as we are going to be off to Old Trafford in a week's time, and we will be talking plenty about Reading's trip to Manchester United in just a little bit. We'll also be reviewing the 4-0 defeat at Stoke. In brief, I think it's probably best to say. And doing that with me this week is the view from the Dolan end. It is Ben Thomas. How's it going, mate?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks, mate. Yeah, not too bad at all, really, for what is essentially a Monday in January. So, yeah, it's not been a good weekend for the club at all, really, but I'm sure we'll get into that in due course.
Yeah, I think a Monday in January is definitely the vibe of this weekend so far. So yeah, we'll be getting on to Stoke in a little bit. We've got a bulging mailbag. Always like having a bulging mailbag full of questions about what's going on at the moment. Bit of Newsbites as well, catch you up on what's been going on around the club. And yeah, then we'll end the show. If you're listening to this just to get the Man United stuff, it's a bit further towards the end. The timestamp will be on the Spotify or the whatever channel that you use to get your podcast, so you can find that and have a little skip through if you want, but I would highly recommend sticking around for the entire show. We've got just before we go into the recap, we have got to always thank our sponsors, ZCZ Films, and our Patreon subscribers. I don't know if people saw actually a little bit of stuff going on with SB Nation during the week. A lot of websites have been told that they're leaving SB Nation, which actually follows ourselves. Hopefully Sim doesn't mind me saying this, but ourselves being told that we need to vacate basically in I don't know when actually. That's kind of the fun part of it. But that's kind of where our resources and time and effort are going into at the moment. So hopefully all those lovely people putting their hands in their pockets for a little bit of a tip will see the fruits of that labour. Right then, let's go on to the recap and talk about the Stoke away game.
Come rain or shine, it's time to relive the latest match action with the recap.
This podcast is sponsored by ZCZ Films, Reading's oldest ultras.
Right then, Ben, we went to Stoke. We had 60% possession, and would you know, we didn't do very well with it. It's probably the gist of the Stoke game. It was maybe, if you wanted to be charitable, you'd say it wasn't a kind of 4-0 defeat performance. I mean, it was only 2-0 until the 80th minute, and it probably was a 2-0 defeat performance, and it just didn't work, did it? Just nothing about this game went right. What for you kind of stood out as just stuff that Reading got badly wrong, basically?
I suppose how long have we got really on this podcast to go over it? Yeah, I mean, it was just complete trash, wasn't it? I kind of expected us to, do that typical thing where Stoke haven't been in good form at home, haven't been in form generally, really, and we turn up and we kind of let them in the game a bit, and it all gets a bit sort of nerve-wracking and we end up with a draw or whatever. That would have been fine for us, keep us ticking over. But to capitulate in terms of the 4 goals was really, I say unforgivable, that's a bit dramatic, but it was very, very poor all round. And, you're right to say we had 60% possession, but when you're playing a midfield 3 that are basically identical to each other, you'd kind of expect that to happen, really. It's very, very difficult to keep defending these away performances and these kind of away results. This is the 4th or 3rd time that we've had a 4-0 reverse this season. And quite honestly, it's getting boring now. We don't seem to be able to compete when we're bullied a little bit. We don't seem to be able to stand up to teams properly away from home, and it's something that ultimately has got to change. We're talking about a team that in us has got a very, very good home record, but we go away and it all falls apart. And the worrying thing is that they're so Jekyll and Hyde, these performances, that you wonder if this is going to be the norm until the end of the season, really. I thought the team selection wasn't too odd, apart from the 3 players that I mentioned in Hendrik, Loom and Forner. But we just showed very, very little imagination. And when you've got the supposed experience at the back there, you should be dealing with those, with the goals that we conceded a lot better, really. It really was very, very poor. And I think, as you made the point, it was 2-0, on 57, 58 minutes, something like that. But when you've got, when you're still in the game at that point, you've still got sort of, half an hour to try and do something, to then not do anything for 20 minutes until we concede it on the 80th it was baffling. It really, really was. And all due respect to Dwight Gale, but I don't think he scored in something like 50 games until he came up against us. So it kind of, everything that went wrong, really. And it's not, it's not just a one-off. And I think that's the concerning thing about this now. And obviously we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about Ince's comments, but, the whole day just smacked of last year. So yeah, very, very frustrating, very disappointing, and ultimately at the moment very, very concerning with the trip that we've got this weekend coming up. We're going to be quite quickly back into this run of form that we don't want to be in, basically.
Yeah, there are some parallels we've had with recent seasons. It feels to me a little bit more like the season before, although that obviously did end up with nearly getting in the playoffs. In a minute, I'll go through the stats for that, but I want to go into a bit more about the performance first, because as you say about the lineup, for me, Andy Carroll was injured. Hutchinson and Sarr weren't available. These things happen. It just felt to me, and it's felt to me like this has kind of been bubbling under for a long time now, that having Yeardon, Holmes and McIntyre as a back three is so lightweight. And then you've got Hoylett and Rahman on the side, and it's just flimsy. That as a back five, you've got kind of one good central defender in there and a good wing back. And let's face it, I feel bad saying it, but I just think Baba Rahman's just not very good at this, even at this level. I know he's come from Chelsea and everything. I know he's probably got ambitions to get back higher than this, but I don't know, the Championship, maybe he'd suit playing abroad in a top league or something, and not to get too kind of old-fashioned about it, but in the Championship, too flimsy as a left-back. Hoylett as a right wing-back should not be our first choice. That should be like we got Scott Dann on the bench, play him at centre-back and put Yeardom out right, play three proper centre-backs, I think. And that kind of is a bit part of it for me. The possession, I'm interested to know what you think you'd rather do in this scenario, because Stoke let us have the ball. So would you rather us knock around the ball until we give it up and lose it, or maybe try and do better with it? We've got a couple of players who can play with the ball, although not many. Or would you actually, if they're going to let us have the ball, why don't we just knock it long anyway? Why don't we play our game and just lump it up front? We got Yaku Mate there, who's not had the best season, and maybe this is Ince got kind of done in this game, because if he plays Tom Ince deeper instead of someone like Forner or Loom, and then has Mate and Long or Mate and Jab there, you have that option of just knocking it long each time, don't you? But with Mate up against three centre-backs, we couldn't do that. So in one sense, it is kind of, if we had Andy Carroll, etc. But on the other hand, Paul Ince, I do think he got done a little bit in this game.
Well, I think he tried to be too clever without actually being clever, because, as you say, if you're going to play it long, which they probably should have done in that game, just play Jow. I know he's got his detractors. I know people don't like him. I know he's not flavour of the month. But why would you play Ince, who has been our best player, full stop, to be honest? But certainly our most creative midfielder. Why would you play him up front in a game like this when he's going to get very, very little service? He's not going to be able to get the ball on the ground and take people on and kind of thread balls through, which is what his game is built around. So why you wouldn't play Jow in this situation, I don't know. You make a really good point about, going back to the defence, about Dan not playing. He clearly doesn't rate him, or he clearly doesn't trust him to be able to see out even the first half of the game at the moment with his injury problems. And then Bengay as well. It just, on paper, it should have worked. But time and again, these things don't. And as much as I love him, again, you're right, Mark, we shouldn't be relying on Julia Hoylett at 30 plus or whatever he is to be a first choice wing back. It's just nonsense. It really is. And I know that we've had injuries. We've had injuries for 2-3 seasons, but there must be some other options that we can bring through in games like this that will at least give us a bit more fight and a little bit of grit, and just be aggressive. sort of Rahman is not the player that he was. I'm not sure why he came back in the first place, really. I think he was a good morale boost when we were sort of starting the season when he came back this year. But he's not been good enough, anywhere near good enough for let alone our team, but for the league. And really, it's down to recruitment again. We on paper again we brought in some good players, but it's just not worked. With Hutchinson, it's pointless. It's almost now a situation where you're thinking, can the season end now? Because we've got players that are already, we're coming into February, they're limping through the season, and we're sort of patching it up again. So it's very, very frustrating, really. And I think, yet again, we're in a situation where we've got a manager who doesn't know his best 11, even when they're all fit. And that's a concern because, you're looking at the bench. Obviously, Dan, we talked about Guinness Walker probably should have started in this game, and Benge should have started in this game. Zhao should have started in this game. And then you've got Aziz and Long as well. So it's not like we haven't got the options there, but why he went with that back three, I don't know. And certainly for me, the biggest bugbear is that midfield three, because we talk about the wing backs and defence, but that midfield is just awful. It's just absolutely ridiculous the way that they've performed this season as individuals, as a unit. So to play all three of them are baffling. It really is. And that's the concern, really, is that there is a sneaking suspicion now, or more of a suspicion, that he doesn't really know what he's doing tactically. And I think, long term, that is going to be a real issue for us moving forward.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about the long term now, just to finish off the recap, because I know we could go through the goals and everything, but I don't think anyone really listens to this podcast for analysis of the 4 goals that Reading conceded this week. So I'll lay out some stats, and we'll kind of say whether we are kind of a little bit concerned or what have you. But I mean, obviously we're concerned about how concerned we are. So since October the 3rd, and I appreciate that that's a bit of an arbitrary date that makes Reading look bad, but it's still a date. So 17 games we played. We've won 4 of those 17 in the league, conceded 27 goals, and we would be 22nd. So that's by definition relegation form since the start of October, basically, which is a quite considerable period of time now. All season, in terms of away form, we're 23rd in the league, worst defence, and yet we've got the 22nd lowest number of goals scored. So it's not even that we're going away and we're throwing all our eggs in one basket and just going mental and attacking people. We are just doing everything badly. And I suppose the defence has come about because of 3 or 4 4-0 defeats. But I mean, 1 4-0 defeat in a season you kind of accept, particularly at our level. But 3 or 4 now, at teams like Rotherham and Stoke, you're starting to, that's not acceptable, basically. And yet, it is important to say that we're 11 points clear of the drop zone, only 5 off the playoffs. I mean, is this season, it's still relatively not that far past halfway. Is there actually a genuine fear in you that we could drop into a relegation battle, or are we just is this going to be one of those seasons like when we've had it with Paunovic before, and I remember like when Steve Clarke's been in charge and stuff, when we've had a good start, looked kind of okay for a few weeks, and then ultimately just kind of simmered into like 18th. And that's just been where our level is. And, the last 4 weeks, the last 6 to 8 weeks of the season have effectively been dead.
It's a big statement to make. I'm going to stick my neck out and say I don't think we're going to get relegated. I think we've got more about us this season in terms of characters. And I know people listening to this will roll their eyes because you can't build a football club on characters. There needs to be a balance of tactical awareness, talent, everything else. But there is more about us this season that I've seen, and I guess other people have seen, for me to know that we or be fairly convinced that we're going to stay up. Coupled with the fact that there are some truly awful teams in the league, Wigan, Blackpool aren't looking great. Huddersfield probably are going to be there or thereabouts as well. So I really don't see us getting dragged too much into that. My concern is that all the work, all the goodwill that Paul Ince has banked becomes undone when we, if this keeps going and we end up sort of losing games by sort of the same margins that we did on Saturday, really. The concerning thing really for me was last Saturday against QPR, because we're up against a team that have won 1 in 13, and by the end of the game they were playing like prime Barcelona against us. It really was, having been 2-0 up at home, just see the game out, and we let them back in. And there was those kind of, on one hand you're thinking, well, last season we would have lost that game, the mentality would have caved, but there are still fragilities there, and that's a lot of that stuff that happened last week was basics. It's the same with this Saturday. It is just basics. We're not getting absolutely smashed by teams, but we're just making it far too easy for them. We're not being tactically clever in the way we're setting the teams up. We're not kind of managing the game, within the 90 minutes to be able to get something out of it. And really, the most concerning thing of all, and we're not quite in Pauno territory yet, but Ince's penchant for kind of throwing players under the bus. Yeah, the players were bad, but I honestly think this is a coaching issue, a tactical issue, rather than the players have suddenly become terrible. There are some good players in there. We've got better players than we had this time last year, certainly in the way that they're performing anyway. And I really do worry when he comes out with the sort of stuff that he came out with, post-game on Saturday, this kind of, they did this, they've done this. It should be we, really. He's part of that. Him saying he's not going to apologise to people. Well, I think he probably should. And I think he probably should start apologising to the players, certainly in private, and coach them in a slightly different way. And really just stepping up to what, we want our manager to be at this football club. I've said time and again I like him. So I like him as a character. I like him as a bloke. He's very, very good with the fans. And every time I've met him, he's always been, nothing less than charming, really. But ultimately, Saturday was on him. And we've said this, and you guys on the pod have said it as well throughout the season. There have been times when we've lost games because of his decision-making. And for him to come out and say, I could have swapped all 10 at half-time and then not make a sub until, 65, 66 minutes? It's just bizarre. It's really bizarre. If it's not working at half-time, change 1, change 2. Try and go after the game a little bit. But to not do anything for that period of time and then turn around and go, well, I could have swapped them all. What was he open to happen, in that time? But it wasn't suddenly going to change and flip on its head if fresh blood wasn't going to come onto the pitch. So he's got to be careful, really, for me, in terms of the way that he's saying these things. And, the icing on the cake, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, was to say that this coming week against United doesn't matter. Well, 3,000 fans have just paid £46 for a ticket, plus travel expenses, to be told, oh, it doesn't matter. It's a nothing game. Well, it's not to our fans, put it that way. And that stuff really does irk the fan base. Whether you're going up to Manchester or not, that's not a good soundbite to have coming out of the manager of this football club.
Yeah, well, let's hear the sound bites of the manager. Actually, we got the clip of Paul Ince talking to the club after the game, and then we'll be going into the mailbag and hearing from you guys on social media.
3 goals we've given today by our defensive mistakes, and that's disappointing for me. It really is. It's probably the first time that they've probably let me down, or we've let the fans down. We'll let the club down, apart from maybe Rotherham at the start of the season, but. I think today was the first time we let our fans down. For us, we have to be competitive for us to, win second balls. But what we can't do, we can't just give away mistakes like we did defensively. And that's what we did. And we allowed them to get, we allowed the fans to get up. And then we have to, make 4 subs to try and change the game.
For all the latest Reading news, analysis and opinion, visit the website at thetilehurstend.com.
Right, as always, you can get in touch with us via the Twitter, the Facebook, and the email. Alan Scott has done just that. He's emailed thetilehurstend@gmail.com saying, does anyone have a stat on how many goals we've gifted teams this season because of our mistakes? Reducing the mistakes is what's needed to give us consistency if we're ever going to improve. So frustrating. Unfortunately, I don't have a stat on that. I always find that personally, the stats for mistakes that lead to goals are a little bit kind of convoluted because what one person considers a mistake might not be considered a statistical mistake, or you might give the ball away a minute before a goal or whatever. So I don't have the stat, but I think that kind of goes back to what we're talking about with the basics. And the Stoke game, particularly the first goal, was so frustrating to find ourselves in that scenario. The Paul Ince has generally kind of, he's ironed out a lot of the issues of just giving the ball away near our own goal. So it was totally frustrating. On the topic of substitutions, which Ben touched upon a minute ago, Eddie Core saying, if Paul Ince wished he could sub all 11 players at half-time, why were there no changes until 70 minutes? Which I think is literally what you just said, Ben. Dean Bennett saying, why does Ince never take any responsibility for his results? The way he sets us up isn't helping him or the team to succeed. He keeps chucking the players under the bus. And if I was a player and the manager kept chucking me under the bus, it wouldn't want me to make me play for him. And Chris Baker saying, will Ince's refusal to take any responsibility if a result goes poorly be his undoing in the next 6 months? Well, I mean, supposedly he's got a 3-year contract, although, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, I don't know what the circumstances around that or any clauses in that are. I think this is the thing for me with Ince, is that I completely agree with what everyone said. I think that I recall, I think it's one of those Amazon documentaries with maybe Man City where Guardiola or someone was saying, like, in the dressing room, he's saying, like, I will defend you to the earth in front of the media, but in the dressing room, I will deliver some home truths and you may not like it and everything. And that's kind of the way that it's always made sense to me, is that I think it was, I mean, this is a little bit of a throwback, but kind of on topic for this week. Remember watching Sir Alex Ferguson in his interviews after games? How many times did you see him throw his players under the bus? If his players play badly, how many times was that the referee's fault or even the journalist's fault or some such nonsense where he would just completely take, and Mourinho as well is another one who in his Chelsea years was really good at that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've always felt like that's the better way of doing it.
I think it's basic leadership, Mark, isn't it? It's protect the group at all costs. And it's not just Ince. It seems to be the way in which, Russell Martin did it when we beat them over Christmas. He was straight on there and saying his players were weak and they weren't aggressive and they, I think he said soft underbelly or something along those lines. It seems to be that, modern managers these days feel like they're going to win over fans by slating the players. And really, it sounds obvious, but the manager needs the players to go and do the business on the pitch, regardless of what they've told them. They need to go out and get the points. The manager can't go and win the points. So I never understand that from a leadership point of view, why you'd go after your own players. And to be fair to Ince, when we played well, he literally heaps praise on the players. He talks about them being brilliant. Not quite Harry Redknapp, terrific territory, but he's along those lines, But this whole kind of this knee-jerk response, and we've talked about this before, haven't we, about managers not giving interviews straight after the game and players having a bit of time to breathe before they talk to the media. But Paul Ince is classic for that. You think about some of the great managers we've had at the club, and they never used to criticise the players. That's the fans' job, really, isn't it? To be honest, it's very, very difficult to justify. We as fans, we don't need to be told when the players play badly. We know that. We know which players play well. We know which players don't play well. We've got our favourites. We've got our non-favourites. But for the manager to come out and kind of always behave like a fan in that moment is not good. And it's it's all well and good for them to, as I said, heap praise when they've done well. But there needs to be a little bit of protection. There really does. For some of these players. Some of them are still young, some of them are still learning their trade, but ultimately they don't need to be hung out to dry like that. And what's worse is he's then going back into training, on the Monday or the Tuesday or whatever, expecting to get a result. And if I was there as one of the guys that have just kind of written in has said, it wouldn't want to make me want to get out and play for him and do as best I can. When he said the things he said on the Saturday after the game. So there's a balance, which I don't think for me he's kind of striking particularly well at the moment.
Yeah, and I get that. I think as well, that my kind of slight thoughts on the Russell Martin, Paul Ince stuff is that maybe it's the fact that these players of the noughties and the 90s predominantly, and kind of the early 10s as well, where football was a lot more blood and guts, like blood and thunder, that sort of stuff. It was like you work as hard as you can, and the technical stuff isn't really what you were trained to do. You were trained to be, as fit as possible. And Paul Ince is a very good example of that, of course. Russell Martin probably is as well, actually. He wasn't the most technical right back in the world, but, gave his everything, and that was kind of the point. These days, players, just to take our academy, for example, are much more technically savvy. And I guess in theory, there's only so many hours in the day. If they're training their technique when they're 15, they're not training their lunging slide tackles as much. So maybe it's a bit of a generational thing. I'd have to be, a football player with that generation to prove that. But that's my thoughts. And the only other thing I'd have to say on the Paul Ince thing is that I think what Chris Baker says is that the fear is that there's going to be a bad atmosphere over towards the end of the season if Reading continue to drop off, maybe have a bit of a flirt with relegation or something. I think 11 points at this stage is pretty comfortable. It's about as comfortable as it is for any team in this league. So that's just the fear. And if it gets to the summer, then there's a unanimous-ish feeling among the fans that Paul Ince is not the man to take us forward. Then, as you're saying, that hard work that has been done over the past 12 months to bring us back into favour after the Paunovic debacle, there's a danger there, isn't there, really, for that being lost? So a few more questions to get through then. DW, he asked about the Ince stuff as well, about the subs. Ince taking an ounce of blame. He also says, why doesn't Ince want to turn to Mbenge? Dean Bennett also tweeted us saying, what does Mbenge have to do to start a game? He signed up to a new deal, saying how delighted he was that he chose to keep developing at Reading, but then he doesn't get picked. It's very odd. And yeah, I just agree with that. I think that like I said earlier, the fact that we're playing Hoylett as a kind of first choice right back, Yiadom as a centre-back, I just don't like. I just want him out on the flank and doing what he does. And having Mbenge next to him, I think, would probably be a good idea. Or, whether it's Mbenge on the right, I guess isn't that bad either. So even into midfield again, I would just rather him be there than Loom or someone that's I'm a bit baffled by it. But I guess I do feel like it's not a kind of personal thing. I do feel like Mbenge will be back at some point. Like, we've obviously not seen the last of him.
No, not at all. The lads at Reading Between the Lines made a really good point on their pod last week before, and basically, they had a big chat about Ince not liking players making mistakes, and they talked about Mayte missing the penalty. They talked about Guinness Walker in one of the games earlier in the season getting bombed out for 2-3 months or whatever he was missing for. So. Ince has got previous here, and I don't want us to turn into a podcast of us bashing him, because that's not the case, but there are fundamentals that he's getting wrong, and one of them is really, I feel, and I would agree with, as I said, that Reading Between the Lines podcast, is that he doesn't forgive players particularly easily. Ajaru is a slightly different issue here. That's it's a completely separate box altogether. But some of the players really need to be given a bit more of love publicly, as we said previously, but also being given that second chances a lot quicker, because, you make a mistake, it's much easier to get back out there, get back on the horse and get on with your job to get over that. If you're not given that opportunity, that mistake will just kind of bowl through your head and it will stay there and things will get worse. So I think there is definitely, a track record of him getting frustrated with players and almost casting them aside, but not giving them the opportunity to put that right. And on that note, I'd expect a fully changed team for Man United on Saturday, because they all made the mistake of not doing the basics. So that'll be interesting to see who he picks on Saturday for what is essentially, in his words, a nothing game.
Yeah, for sure. We'll be talking about that one a bit later on. Then Benjamin Vickers saying, who would buy Obi Ejaria? Why did his form drop off a cliff? I think supposedly the reports are that he's been told he can leave. He is in training apparently and fit, but not included at all, which puts us in a very interesting scenario given, the bench isn't bad. It's not like we're lacking players, as we spent half the podcast saying about. So, for me, I just think that Ejaria is just a player who I just don't know who would take him. I think that's the problem, because League One, unless we're literally willing to let him go for nothing on the hope that he picks up some form that we can sell him in the summer, Yeah, I just can't see it, unfortunately. I think that probably the most likely scenario is that if he doesn't go in this month, then he'll get given a chance to come back into the team and prove himself again. Loyal Royal, last question of the week then, saying, great to get that performance out the system. So the question is, who do we want in round 5 of the FA Cup? I'm hoping for Man City away. Loyal Royal, obviously, looking forward to driving up to Old Trafford for an 8 p.m. start and quite fancying doing it all again, basically, in the 5th round if we get through. I mean, my dream tie, eventually we'll get one, Ben, is to have like a Swindon or Oxford or an Aldershot away from home, but it doesn't feel like that's ever going to happen.
No, we haven't been great, obviously, in the cup for a little while, and the draws that we've had have, with all due respect to Watford, have either been uninspiring at home or we get ties that we don't want away. Anyone think that we're really demanding and picky when it comes to our cup ties, which I would argue to the death that is not the case. But you're right, a local derby would be brilliant. And just to get, just to get people back in the stadium and buzzing. Honestly, would have settled for a Premier League side at home, just to get the fans back and seeing how without contradicting myself, how we have been playing or can play this season. You think back to sort of the Blackburn game and the Norwich game at home. We were really good in those games. Obviously, we've had our blips, but just getting people back and excited about the club again would just be brilliant after so many years of just trash, basically. So I would have loved a big side at home just to get the numbers back. But we'll have to settle for a journey up to Old Trafford on Saturday for now and see if we can by some miracle squeak through that one.
Yeah, that's the dream. Squeaking through is the absolute. I mean, we might have a replay. We might take them back. I mean, I think there are replays in the 4th round of the FA Cup. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I mean
there are. Yeah,
that wouldn't be a bad result, would it? Taking the back here, they've got a hell of a lot of games in the next few weeks. They've got I think they're playing every midweek until March. So I don't know when this replay could take place, but that could be a bit interesting, couldn't it? Right, let's get into some news bites now. Catch you up on what's been going on around the club this week, and then we'll get into that Man United game.
You're listening to the Tilehurst End Podcast by Reading fans for Reading fans.
Well, let's start with the under-21s because they played today and they played Charlton in the Professional Development League. Players included in that lineup: Boyce Clark sort of in goal, Michael Craig still playing, Ava Choman, Jamari Clark starting as well. Camera was on the bench. Not really seen much of him this season, have we? Nelson Abbey as well, also included. Jamari Clark got the first goal. Then it was Adrian Akande and Kian Levy. So a 3-0 win against Charlton for the under-21s, which is good. The under-18s didn't play this weekend. They lost 5-4 to Ipswich a week ago, and then next week they host Colchester. That's on the 28th. And the women, they were in action at home to Manchester United and conceded an 87th minute winner. Did save a penalty before that, actually. And Man United are, basically one of the teams challenging for the title this season. So very good effort to almost get a point out of that game. Would have been a really good point. They've got Leicester away in the FA Cup on Sunday. So Ben, you were down in that game. What do you think of the women's team and their performance against Man United?
I thought they were good. Yeah, I mean, before going to it, I think Man United deserved to win the game on a balance of play, really. First half, I thought they were very, very good. I thought we were very good. Harries was sharp up front. McCandy was superb at the back, absolutely domineering at the back. She really was fantastic. Woodham again had a really good game at left back, sort of getting forward and trying to slot little balls through here and there. But we just didn't have enough in terms of having that confidence to take the strike when we needed to. The overall, I thought the performance was good, and I think that there were green shoots there for Kelly and the team. Certainly, there was a good crowd there as well. A lot of them were Man United fans, so I don't think we can go on too much about having a home attendance record when a lot of them were opposition fans, to be honest. But it was really good to see a lot of people down there, and the players were feeding off that as well. There was a lot of confidence in that team, and ultimately they were. They looked like they were good for the point, but just to concede right at the end there was really disheartening. So hopefully they can brush that off and keep going in the league, and obviously the cup competitions are still in. So Yeah, look, it was a lot better than I've seen them play previously this season. Still a bit of work to do to kind of get themselves back up the table, but there was a lot of positives in the play, and I think the way they certainly kept the ball and tried to make things happen was a real positive for the side.
Yeah, for sure, and hopefully there can be a bit of a cup run. Would be nice to get up against a Leicester team that aren't they're not doing particularly well in their season, are they? So there's hopefully a bit of a chance there to get a good win away from home next week, and then a bit of a cup run would certainly be good. Right then, let's talk about some cup runs. Talk about the cup run Reading are only just at the start at as we go to Manchester United on Saturday.
Be loud and be proud and back the boys and make some noise. Come on, you Rs!
Shout out to this week's podcast sponsor, ZCZ Films, showing that age is no barrier to being a hula hoop.
So it is Saturday, January 28th, an 8 p.m. kickoff, and it's live on ITV4. So pretty big, I'd say, for Reading going to Manchester United in the FA Cup. It's the fourth round tie. It is our 16th game against Man United in the FA Cup, and we've won one of them so far. So I'd take like a 1 in 15 chance of winning this. That probably feels about right, doesn't it? So yeah, that was in 1927 when we won that game. It's a bit of a interesting one, isn't it, Ben? Because this is a bit of fun. You know, it's a good day out, although we have been there twice in the last 5 years, I think it is. And for FA Cup ties, that's kind of a lot. So it doesn't feel particularly fresh. We've obviously been there in the league a few times as well back in the day. So it's a bit of fresh, it's a bit of fun, it's a bit of something different and a big game and everything. Is there perhaps a little sense that, of trepidation with this, a little sense that maybe this hasn't come at the right time for us, that we're maybe not, on the verge of causing an upset? And if we felt like we were going to cause an upset, how would we do it?
Well, I think unfortunately with these games, it largely depends on who they don't play in their team. I was looking at their fixture list. Obviously, they play Forest on Wednesday, don't they, in the Carabao Cup? And realistically, what they put out as their starting 11 will go a long way to, or part way anyway, to explaining and kind of helping us work out who they will play against us on Saturday. Honestly, with this kind of game, I think it's more about what they do rather than what we don't do, because whichever team we play, we're going to be up against it in terms of personnel. I would like to see some of the youth players take part, because I think, and I hate the phrase, but it's good experience. There is not a Reading fan alive that is going to be expecting anything out of this. So without going down that cliche of just kind of enjoying the occasion and stuff, there's possibilities here for those youth players to get something out of it and take that forward into next season, when you'd really like to see them pushing for claiming places in the starting 11 and match their squad. So for me, it's more about going there and not rolling over and giving a good account of ourselves. And that's very difficult to say when we've lost 4-0 to Stoke, who have one of the worst home records in the league at the moment. So I don't want to say it can't be any worse than it was on Saturday, because obviously it can from a scoreline point of view. But I just hope that we don't completely embarrass ourselves and give a good account of ourselves. If we get through by some miracle, then it becomes one of the greatest results we've had in recent years, possibly decades. But everyone will be expecting us to lose that game probably quite heavily. So if we can keep it to 0, that'd be really good, I think, to be honest.
Yeah.
We'll see. Look, we'll see. It's one of those games. It's happening. We're going to get on with it. I'm going to ignore what Paul Ince said about it not mattering, because it does matter. Every game matters to our fans and should matter to the players. But it's an opportunity for some of those players to really give it a go and kind of express themselves in a completely different environment, away from the league.
I think that when Paul Ince says it's a nothing game, I have a feeling that's him kind of taking the pressure off of his own players and of obviously the performance and the team, because ultimately, obviously, they're not expecting to get a result there. But the question for me with this team selection is: do we go with our experienced pros? Do we play Scott Dan at the back, Shane Long, maybe Junior Hoylett, Hendrick in the middle? Or do we go kind of a bit more risky and play Femi Aziz and Benge, bring him back in? I presume Bouznes is going to start. Have Guinness Walker maybe as the left back. Do you kind of go with that idea a bit more, something a bit fresh, a bit of energy, players who haven't played there before? Or do you think that, obviously Shane Long has played at Old Trafford a few times now, and generally speaking, I don't think he's a player that they fear, but he's a player who's played at Old Trafford, so he knows what he's doing, and he won't be, he'll just get on with it a bit more. Which do you think is the better route to take? Because I would probably say the experience side would be what I started with.
Yeah, there is an element of that. But it depends how deeply you want to think about it and how deeply Paul Ince thinks about it, because there will be players within that squad that he knows, either contractually or from a personnel point of view, they won't want to be here next season and they'll be leaving. Hendrick probably won't be with us next year. So is he taking up a spot that, wild card, it won't happen, but someone like Kamara could play? Or is it an opportunity for Forner to try and stake his claim in the midfield for the rest of the season if he plays? So there is an element here of Paul Ince trying to redeem himself as a tactician and coach, if that's possible, by picking a really good blend of players. What I don't want to see is kind of like for like, where he goes, right, well, this is a squad we had for Stoke and this is the squad that we're going to take up to Manchester United and this is the squad that's going to play. Because A, they've just lost 4-0, and B, it doesn't really bring anyone on. You'd like to see some of those success stories from Watford, obviously a Brayford who we were raving about and had a great game. Craig was in and around the team and came on for like the last 10 or 15 minutes, if I recall. So there's players there that would benefit from being part of that experience, but it's only worth putting them in the squad if there's plans to give them, minutes on the pitch, because it's a, if you've never been to Old Trafford, it's a very, very different way. It's a fabulous ground. It really is. One of the greatest, if not the greatest in the world. And it's a very, very different environment to playing Rotherham away or whatever. So it really does need to be a balance. I don't really want to see Hendrick in the team because I don't see the point. Does Long play? Maybe. He might offer something different up front, but a lot of these players, again, are kind of like for like, really. If he's going to really spring a surprise, he wants to see those players that maybe they might have missed slightly on the scouting side of it or whatever. But whether or not they're comfortable enough and confident enough to do that, I don't know. It's going to be, I think the team selection is going to be more interesting than the actual game itself at this point, because he's got to try and do something to arrest the last few games whilst making sure that we don't get completely destroyed up there. And it's going to be a difficult job this week, I think, to get that balance right. Obviously they had an under-21 game today, and I saw Noel Hunt talk about those players being involved in the squad. Well, how many did you take? You can't take them all, and you've got to think about positions and areas that we're lacking in terms of weakness at the moment. So it's going to be an interesting week for them on the training pitch, and I'm hoping that there's a few surprises in the starting 11 for us that we can kind of pin our hopes on and really get behind the team.
Yeah, and obviously so much of it, as you said a minute ago, so much of it does depend on what United do. It's a semi-final first leg they've got to do away at Nottingham Forest, and then they've got, a lot of games going up really. So they've got the second leg of the semi-final a few days after, the Wednesday after they play us. So in there somewhere, they will be resting players, and we're kind of the prime candidate in that sense as well, to be fair. So it makes a lot of sense for them to be thinking about, who they can take out, whether it's Rashford, Bruno Fernandes, Anthony. Are we going to be up against Wout Weghorst? I kind of think we are. Maybe Sancho comes back against us or something like that, which would be quite interesting to see. And I'm sure that the fans going up would like to see those players. I would not like to face Marcus Rashford at all at the moment. And that's, I would be saying that if I was like a Barcelona fan. It's just not something that, Rashford on the left, I guess we probably have like Yiadom and Hoylett doubling up on him, which maybe if they were then to double up themselves and have four of those players, they'd kind of have a chance of stopping Rashford at the moment. But I mean, I kind of think that those sort of players won't necessarily be playing against us. So it's going to be really interesting to see what both teams do, isn't it? And I don't think that we'll be playing a team of kids, but yeah, there's always that chance that, Tom Ince won't be playing for us or something like that. I don't know if Andy Cowell players are back injury wise. That's going to be something that we'll find out later in the week. But I mean, I watched the Man United versus Charlton game in the Carabao Cup a few weeks ago, and they genuinely weren't that good, United, until Rashford came on and scored 2 goals late in injury time, and that kind of killed the game. And I suppose that's what we're clinging on to, isn't it? It's the sense that United just don't get going. The atmosphere's a bit flat. Nothing's necessarily clicking for them. We're looking pretty solid. And then ultimately we're just looking at a set piece or a stunning counter-attack, aren't we?
Yeah. And it's how much we concentrate if the game goes like that. We do have a penchant of switching off. QPR game is a classic example of that, where we gave the ball away too much and then they came onto us, like a hot rash. So it's really how much we're able to concentrate and really manage the game properly. It really will be interesting. I'm gonna watch the game on Wednesday against Forest and just kind of see how they line up. But you're right, that something's going to have to give, because they're fighting. I mean, obviously, the Premier League is probably beyond them now, but they're still in other competitions and they're going to want to win as many of those as they can. But the resources they've got are available and non-comparable to what we've got. So it will be interesting from a lineup point of view. And if we get to sort of 70 minutes and the scores are level, you're hoping then that we can take them or bring them back to us for a replay, just to kind of get more games in the legs and kind of build that home form. And as I said earlier, get people back into the stadium. This is Reading Football Club in 2023. Unfortunately, this is kind of where we are at the moment. But look, it's a game that a lot of people will go up and enjoy. I know a lot of families are going up there as well. Good on them for going up there. There's been a lot of criticism about people not being able to get tickets, but ultimately, from my point of view, the club had tickets that they needed to get rid of sharpish, and they've done that. Any money is welcome money for us at the moment, and we've got to kind of look at where we are and what the priorities are. But I do feel that this will be a nice distraction for a weekend, just to kind of to see how the other half live and to see how much we, how far we are away from competing with these kind of guys, really. And I think I already know the answer, but it's just going to be nice to see our players at least try and compete, with a club like United on what is essentially supposed to be a level playing field.
Yeah, it'll be a good insight to how we'll fare in the Premier League next season. I think is probably the best way to end this preview.
Exactly, that's exactly what I was going to say next. Yeah,
and let's not analyse that or ask any questions about why that might be a flawed sentence. We'll just move on and we'll finish the show with some predictions, because we have the prediction league, which, Ben, you're winning at the moment, 21 points, Westy 19. Adam got a defeat against Stoke, so he's on to 18 now. Sim 16, Handbags 14. I'm on 12 because I also said we'd lose to Stoke. Ollie bringing up the rear on 8 points. So the cup games don't count towards our prediction league, because there's already enough games to count towards that with a 46-game championship season. Ben, you can have a first swing at the United result then.
Oh, God. I mean, my instant response was 3-1 United, but I just can't.
I would take us scoring. That sounds right.
Yeah. Can I actually say that we're going to lose the game, even though we probably are? Yeah, go on then, 3-1 United. I think we'll score. I'd like to think we'll score anyway, just to make it worth the trip.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to go 3-1 United.
Yeah, well, the Star coaches are sold out. And I mean, last week we did have a discussion with Paul and Marc and Star about the whole thing about how many tickets we were going to take and everything like that. If you want to go and find out why it's only 3,000 and such, that's in last week's episode. I won't hold you too much longer now for this week. But I'm going to go... I'm just going to go for a 4-0 defeat, unfortunately. That's just where I think it's going to be. I really think that we're going to kind of finish this game. I was covering the Man City versus Wolves game on Sunday. And at the end of that game, I looked back and Wolves had genuinely not threatened once. And I think that I'm probably going to look back after this Reading Man United game and think, when was our moment? And I'm not even sure there'll be one. And whether that's pessimistic or whatever, probably is because we've just lost 4-0 at Stoke. Had we just won 1-0 at home or whatever, I'd think that we could scrap it out and such. But maybe we can. Maybe that's what we'll do. But let's enjoy the ride nonetheless. And Ben, thank you very much for coming on this week's show.
Pleasure. If you're going up next week, enjoy it. Or this week, enjoy it. And we'll see you back on the 4th. Watford, is it? Watford at home?
Yeah, we've got the midweek free at least after this game, so it means that there's no excuse for Paul Ince throwing everything he's got at this game. We've got Watford at home on the 4th. We'll be back before that to review the Man United game and talk about the upcoming replay that we'll be playing against them. In a lot of ways, if it wasn't on national TV, it'd be a free hit that you wouldn't even care about. I suppose maybe it's the audience that I'm kind of a little bit apprehensive about Reading embarrassing themselves in front of. But I mean, who wants to talk about that? It's a game of football that Reading could go and make, the best of memories. Hopefully the fans who go up there, particularly if you've not gone to Old Trafford before, highly recommend it. Genuinely just it's a bit of a experience in terms of just seeing all the merchandise out and everything like that. I'm not saying I think it's better than Reading or anything, because I don't think it is for that, but it's just a bit of an experience, and it's a fantastic stadium, great, hopefully a great atmosphere in the away end, no doubt about that at all. And maybe we'll nick a goal and win it. Let's hope so. Come on, you ass.